Hi, everyone. Welcome to Leisrealtalk. All right, it's the weekend. The most difficult topic for me is not the CCP politics. It's talking about people's life in China because it's very sad. Tonight's thumbnail, pigs matter more than people. I mean, it's not a clickbait. It is by definition it's CCP's definition of the reality. And I'll get to that at the end. Do you know what the CCP leaders fear the most? It's the collapse of the system, the collapse of the regime. They've been studying the fall of the Soviet Union carefully, especially Xi Jinping. He's determined to stop history from repeating itself. But if you compare today's China to the Soviet Union in 1990, one thing becomes clear. Chinese society has already gone far beyond the Soviet breaking point. In the Soviet Union's final years, the economy was failing and people lost faith in the system. But what China is facing now is something the USSR never did, a collapse of society, a collapse of social order at the grassroots level. Now, let me ask you, what is the most basic need people expect from society or from a society? It is safety. That's the most basic human need. But in China today, insecurity runs deeper than losing jobs or income or your home. It's about physical danger. It's about fear for your children, for your family, and for your life. And just last week, two viral events forced Chinese citizens to confront a terrifying truth. They're trapped in a system that can claim their life. So let me tell you the two events so that you get an idea why I say Chinese society has gone beyond the Soviet breaking point. First things first, by now you probably have already heard about the lead poisoning scandal at a kindergarten in Tianshui, Gansu province. It exploded across the internet in China. Even Western media reported on it, but mostly by repeating the CCP's official narrative. Yes, the authorities have issued an investigation report. They've identified the so-called source of the lead poisoning and detained 8 people, but the public isn't buying it. In fact, the more people dug into this, the more shocking truth they discovered. This whole scandal actually began back in March. Parents at a kindergarten in Tianshui started noticing their kids showing high levels of lead in routine health checkups. Some children had symptoms like nausea, diarrhea, leg pain, stomach aches. But back then, no one reported it. People didn't connect the dots. It wasn't until early June when follow-up tests showed elevated lead levels. Then parents began talking to each other. As more families compared notes, it became clear this wasn't an isolated case. A lot of kids were showing the same symptoms. They brought the kids to go to local hospitals for more tests. But strangely, all the results came back as normal. But the parents weren't convinced, so they decided to take their children to large cities, and they went to Xi'an for testing. And what they found was shocking. Xi'an's Central Hospital reported that over 70 children had elevated blood lead levels, some as high as 5 times the upper limit of what's considered safe. Many of the test results were 20 times higher than what local hospitals in Tianshui had reported. So that's when the story exploded online. Furious parents filed complaints. They reported the cases to the local authorities. And then on July 1st, the director of the kindergarten was placed under investigation. And then 2 days later, the district's health bureau issued a vague statement suggesting the lead may have come from a food additive, but didn't say which one. Then on July 7th, things escalated further. Lab reports showed that several of the kindergarten's teachers also had dangerously high levels of lead in their blood. Under growing pressure, the local government finally released its official findings on July 8th. They claimed the source of the lead was contaminated food. The kindergarten kitchen, according to them, had illegally used industrial pigment to add color to food. The findings stated that a breakfast cake had 1,000 milligrams per kilo of lead, and corn rolls served at dinner had 1,340 milligrams per kilo of lead. So for comparison, China's food safety limit for lead in food is just 0.5 milligram per kilo. And so that means the food served to these kids contained nearly 2,700 times the legal limit. And the report made one thing clear. This wasn't just the kitchen staff acting on their own. The purchase of the toxic pigment was approved by the principal and one of the school's investors. The authorities even released a surveillance video showing that the kitchen workers were adding food dye to the food. And then out of 251 children at school, 93% or 233 kids were found to have abnormal blood lead levels. And what's strange is that 3 other kindergartens owned by the same investor or owner have no such issue at all. So local authorities responded by charging the principal, the investor, and 6 others with the crime of producing toxic and harmful food. And that's the narrative. A greedy kindergarten cut corners by using cheap, toxic food coloring, and it got caught. Case closed. That's the story told by both the Chinese and Western media. But no, it's not over. Not even close. And what we've just gone over, it's not even half the truth. Okay, so let's start by asking one big question. Why were the test results from Tianshui's local hospitals so wildly different from the ones in Xi'an? One parent, Mr. Liu, was told by Tianshui doctors that his child's blood lead level was 14 micrograms per liter, completely normal, but he was given the test result from a Xi'an hospital that showed 290 micrograms per liter. That's 20 times higher. And another parent was told that their child's lead level was only 5 micrograms by a local hospital. But in Xi'an, it's 232 micrograms. That's 45 times higher. Now, blood lead testing isn't high tech. There might be some differences between tests because they use different equipment, but that kind of extreme variation, it's not normal. You wouldn't see this kind of discrepancy. So let's be honest, something is seriously wrong with Tianshui's hospitals. This isn't about outdated machines or small technical errors. The only explanation is that someone was deliberately manipulating the data. And that means the hospitals were being pressured to lie. But by who? Well, we'll find out. Now let's move to the second big question. What's the real source of the lead? The official story blames it all on the kitchen staff. They used non-edible pigment to cut costs. And authorities, like I said, even released a short surveillance clip to support their claim. But this explanation doesn't hold up. Red flag number one. Online users quickly discover that the pigment used is actually more expensive. The industrial pigment is actually more expensive than certified food-grade dyes. At best, they're roughly the same price. So if the goal was to save money, it doesn't make any sense. Number two, according to the government's own report, the cake, the morning breakfast cake, and the dinner rolls contained lead levels of over 1,000 milligrams per kilo, right? That's the number quoted in the official statement, which is 2,700 times the legal limit. Someone ran the numbers. For the lead levels to reach that high, and based on the lead level used in industrial paint, if lead is if the paint contains lead, they did the math. You will need to mix several kilos of pigment into 1 single kilo of flour. So basically, the kids weren't eating food; they were eating paint, right? Unless the kitchen staff had secretly invented a lead enrichment process that's more advanced than, people say, than Iran's uranium centrifuges. There's just no way they could have achieved those numbers by accident. There's no way that they could have that much lead in the food by using industrial paint. Third, right after the official announcement, a pigment manufacturer, Shenzhen Daxing Chemical Company, issued a public statement, and they made 3 points very clear. Number one, their pigments do not contain lead or mercury, so they could not have caused lead poisoning. Number two, their packaging clearly states not edible and then for industrial use only. So no one should confuse it with food additives. And number three, they conclude that the lead poisoning in Tianshui has nothing to do with their products. Now, the government didn't say which company produced the pigment used in the food, but Daxing's public response didn't come out of nowhere. It's clearly a defensive move, suggesting they were being implicated, at least unofficially. And there's another serious problem here, and it's about timing. Medical experts agree that this level of lead poisoning doesn't happen overnight. Lead builds up gradually. It gets stored in the bones and then slowly releases into the blood over time. So it takes a while. And one parent even produced a medical report from May of last year, already showing elevated blood level in the kid. But according to the official story, the contaminated pigments were only purchased a few months ago. So the timeline doesn't match. And also, people point out that the so-called red date morning cakes and then the corn rolls, they're not served every day. They're not even on the menu every week. If the kids only ate them occasionally, there's no way blood lead levels would reach such dangerous levels, right? Unless the exposure had been happening over a much longer period. And then here's the most damning part. The exact same incident happened 19 years ago. Back in 2006, there was a major lead poisoning event in the same district of Tianshui. Over 200 residents including 53 minors, were found to have dangerously high blood lead levels. Even the state mouthpiece, CCTV, reported it at the time. So what happened here, right? Actually, in 2006, how they did the testing was also very similar. It was exactly the same playbook. So people first went to a local testing center, which found that everyone who got tested had excessive lead in their blood. But the district government refused to acknowledge the results, claiming they were not authoritative. So they brought in the district CDC to retest. And just like magic, there's only one person who was borderline, and everyone else was declared normal. And then still suspicious, the people traveled all the way to Xi'an, same thing, to test their blood. And there, 211 people had dangerously high blood lead levels, and the 68 were confirmed to be suffering from lead poisoning. So here we are nearly 2 decades later, and the exact same thing is happening again in the same district. So can anyone really call that a coincidence? Of course not. The only logical explanation is this: there's a cover-up, and it likely involves the government-level intervention. Now think about it. Local hospitals don't falsify lab reports on their own. They have to be ordered to do so, which means local authorities were involved. So here's what people believe has happened. The true source of the contamination isn't food dye at all. And based on the evidence, this looks like a case of chronic exposure, not a one-time incident that points to something more widespread. And the most likely source? Drinking water, specifically groundwater pollution, which is one of the most common causes of lead contamination. In fact, Chinese netizens have already pointed out something that's very suspicious. Less than 2 kilometers away from the kindergarten sits a lead zinc ore transfer station owned by an SOE, Buying Non-Ferrous Metal Group. It's a massive state-owned enterprise, and this site is used to store and ship mined materials, and the ore is kept in open air. So when it rains, runoff can easily carry heavy metal contaminants into the river, the nearby Wei River. And this facility has long been associated with environmental risks, things like dust, heavy metal pollution, and it's not just in Gansu province. Buying Group has been fined repeatedly across China for similar violations. And get this, the kindergarten is located just 1.7 kilometers downstream from that site. And it gets worse. A local whistleblower claimed that the land where this kindergarten now stands was formerly used by this Buying Non-Ferrous Group to dump industrial waste. Only a few years ago did the government repurpose the land for educational use. And this explains why the 3 other kindergartens run by the same owner have no such issues, because they're not sitting on the contaminated ground. So that is a major clue. And honestly, it makes total sense. The Buying Non-Ferrous Group is a huge SOE, and it's tied to local tax revenue, jobs, and the officials' job reviews. If this company were held responsible, or worse, forced to shut down, the local government would suffer, and officials might even be held accountable. And that is why the local officials covered it up, using their authorities for decades. And that's why the hospitals were ordered to report false results. And that's why they came up with a nonsense story about kitchen staff using illegal pigment. One local resident shared online that his cousin actually works in the kitchen, in the kindergarten kitchen. And she's a rural woman who makes less than 2,000 yuan a month. And the post said that the kitchen staff actually didn't buy anything. They have no control over supplies. They just make the food. Yet now the authorities are blaming them for a crisis that they couldn't even begin to understand. So his cousin's family now worries about her because it's all blamed on them. And you know what? This is not the end. Now, like today, the scandal has gotten has gone outside of Gansu. It started as a local issue in Gansu. Now it has it's all over China now. It has spread to Shanghai. So because the scandal has gotten so much attention, the parents of these sick kids are ordered to bring the kids back to Tianshui for treatment, or they will not be reimbursed for the medical expenses. But the problem is the parents don't trust the local hospitals. And one parent brought his kid to Shanghai, to a hospital called Shanghai Xinhua Hospital for treatment. And his doctor in Shanghai found that both lead and zinc are high in the blood. So this sort of indirectly confirmed that the transportation hub used by that non-ferrous metal group is indeed the culprit, right? Because both lead and zinc are high in the blood test. And the doctor said on social media that the poisoning has been ongoing for more than 3 months. Now, this remark got himself into trouble because it indirectly exposed the lies of the local government because they blame it on a recent food poisoning. So this doctor is ordered to shut up, and his hospital is being ordered not to accept patients from Tianshui. And the hospital in Shanghai doesn't even allow the doctor and the nurse to release the blood test results to the kids' parents. And I've also heard just a few hours ago that hospitals in other parts of China are being told not to accept patients or children from Tianshui. And this development tells me that the central government is involved in this. And someone said it came directly from the state, not the State Department, the State Council, right? And all of these orders, I mean, the objective of them is to control the impact of the scandal and limit its exposure. So if you really think about it, under the CCP rule, the number one threat to people now isn't foreign forces. It's public safety disasters created and hidden by their government, by their own government. The disasters were created by local government, and now the central government are trying to help the local government to hide it. And no, you have 233 families are being affected, but no parents have given any interviews. I mean, we're just not hearing their voice. So remember a week ago, I told you that the biggest risk in China's property market isn't falling prices. It's unsafe construction. It's the people fear that their buildings are going to collapse in the middle of the night because of poor quality. So safety, think about safety is a basic human need. personal safety, economic safety, food safety, environmental safety. If safety is lost, modern society begins to disintegrate. People will be forced to return to a primitive, self-sufficient, family-based style of living. I mean, people would just refuse to interact with others, right? They'll go back to their land and just do their, do their own farming. They'll just isolate themselves and take control of their environment and their food and everything. This is this is where it's heading, I think. So now let me tell you about the second story. On July 2nd, a passenger train traveling from Guangzhou to Hangzhou sideswiped a freight train. So several passenger cars derailed, and the train was forced to stop in Jinhua, Zhejiang. And while that happened, do you know how long the train stopped? 3 hours. And then during that time, the air conditioning shut off. I don't know why the air conditioning shut off. I think it's probably to conserve energy. Now, the problem is the temperature skyrocketed inside the train. The only windows were the tiny ones between train cars. They're nowhere near where the passengers were seated or standing, depending how crowded the trains are or was. So there was no ventilation, or the ventilation was practically non-existent. People started pleading with the staff to open the windows or doors, and doors, I should say. But every request was refused. Some passengers said that it got so hot that the temperature inside reached over 38 degrees Celsius. Or some say it's nearing 40 degrees Celsius. Well, 38 is like, it's over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. And if it's 40 degrees Celsius, that's like 106 degrees Fahrenheit. Several people, including elderly passengers, suffered heat stroke. And so in the middle of this stifling heat, a young man grabbed the emergency hammer and smashed open a window. That one act brought in desperately needed fresh air, and the entire car erupted in applause. But what happened later stunned everyone. When the train finally arrived at its destination, the young man was taken away. And then state-run media published articles condemning him. And this is not just like one state media, it's like all over. They called his action reckless, undermining public order, threatening railway safety, and so on and so forth. Now, to the CCP, smashing that window didn't just break glass, it broke the rules. And the authorities, they're not stupid. They knew exactly what that moment symbolized. That shattered window wasn't just about heat or suffocation. It was about defiance. It was a spontaneous act of civil disobedience. And if they let it slide, others might do the same. In their mind, if someone breaks a train window today, maybe tomorrow, they'll try to break the regime's grip on power. And that's what truly scares them. So the official media wrote this. It says, yes, the train was hot, but it didn't reach the emergency threshold for opening doors or breaking windows. That's crazy. Someone on WeChat pointed out that in 2023, China's State Administration for Market Regulation released official guidelines on how to transport pigs. Okay, so it says, starting April 2024, if the temperature during transport exceeds 25 degrees Celsius, that's 77 degrees Fahrenheit, you're required to take cooling measures like ventilation, shading, or spraying water to prevent pigs from overheating. At first, people thought that post was a joke, but it's not. People verified it, and it was a real regulation. It was real. So when transporting pigs, Chinese law says you must act if it's hotter than 25 degrees Celsius or 77 degrees Fahrenheit. But when humans are stuck in a metal train car nearing 40 degrees Celsius or over 100 degrees Fahrenheit, they're expected to just endure it. So that's why Chinese citizens are saying that we're worth less than pigs. Like, yeah, we humans are worth less than pigs. If you compare today's China to the Soviet Union's final years, Chinese society has long crossed the breaking point. In China, there have been uh, lately so many cases of young people being kidnapped in broad daylight, or young people went missing completely, um, with some suspected of organ harvesting. This is something the Soviet Union never experienced. And in China, the scale and the frequency of food safety scandals are far worse than anything seen in the USSR's final years. In terms of personal safety, Chinese people today are worse off than Soviet citizens in the 1980s. And the system is clearly turning against the majority of people. Right? People are starting to realize it. When their basic safety is gone, they must step up to rebuild a new order. I mean, that's inevitable. So that's why the recent train window breaking incident is so significant. It's significant for the regime. Otherwise, the state control media wouldn't be all over this young man. I mean, look, he just broke a window in the midst of, suffocating heat. Why? What's the issue here? The issue isn't the window. The issue isn't the window or breaking it. The issue is the fact that people are now taking steps to defy the regime, and that's scary. So this is evident that people are stepping up, and it's just the beginning. So hopefully this is helpful to you. Like I said, it's much easier to talk about CCP politics, but talking about Chinese people's life, it is disheartening. Think about these parents. And I heard that the local government is trying to settle the case with the parents. They have agreed to compensate each kid above certain, each kid whose lead level exceeds certain level, 7,000 yuan. That's nothing. I mean, that's like $1,000. I mean, but you ruined the kid's life. And according to the doctor in Shanghai, he said that the kid that he saw was seriously, it was serious. The color of his teeth has changed. So it's a long-term poisoning. So it's just very sad. All right, I want to also give you an update on the rumor that former CCP leader Hu Jintao was dying or has died. It is false. I suspect that it was a false alarm sent by the Xi Jinping camp. On the 9th of July, the CCTV showed Hu Jintao's son, Hu Haifeng, in a high-profile meeting in Xinjiang. And the meeting he attended dated from July 7th to 9th. It was a 3-day event, a 3-day conference. So the junior Hu looked rather relaxed in the TV footage. Now think about it. If his father is dying or has died, there's no way the son will be leaving Beijing and travel to such a faraway place, Xinjiang, for a 3-day meeting. So the fact that the CCTV showed, and then his footage was 3 seconds long. It was quite long. If you count 3 seconds, it's quite long. So that was an intentional act by the CCTV to indirectly dispel the rumor that Hu Jintao has died. All right, that's all. That's all I have for you tonight. Okay. All right, let me see. All right. All right. Yeah, this story, this lead poisoning actually was actually widely reported by Western media. I saw CNN reporting it. Yeah. Okay. All right. Let me see. People have any comments, questions, remarks? Okay. All right. Nothing. No questions. No. All right. That's good. Oh, here's one. Heads up. The WhatsApp. Oh, the WhatsApp. Oh, thank you for the super sticker. The WhatsApp. All right. Here's a question forwarded by Chris. Oh no, that's not it. Okay. Michael in North Carolina, I think. Well, thank you, Michael. All right, here's from Drew H. Oh, where did it go? Drew H. Lei, China seems beyond repair. How do you even suggest China can change? The CCP seems to have rotted the whole country. I agree with you. How do I even suggest China can change? Well, don't underestimate the power of culture, I think, and also the power of faith. I think the Chinese people, there's a trend among the young Chinese to return. They have been visiting, Chinese people have been visiting the temples more than ever, especially among the young people. People are turning to faith to obtain strength. Although the temples that they go to are not real temples, they're controlled by the regime. So they're CCP temples. I think the Chinese people will come together. I think adversity isn't a bad thing. Actually, some Chinese scholars made the comment that America, the problem in America today is that people's life is too comfortable, especially the younger generations. And I think in the West in general, I think America is still better than Europe. But if you look at Europe, people, their life is so easy and comfortable, and that's not a good thing. That's not a good thing. So I think it's the same. We have the same problem all over the world. It's not just China, but this extreme, the extremity of living condition in China actually may not be a bad thing once the nation awakes. I think it will push the counterforce will push China in the right direction. I think it may not be a bad thing. So keep your hope. It's not as bad. All right. From Galia, the kindergarten story resembled the accident with junior bilingual school in Changzhou in 2016 when school was built on chemical dumpster and it caused massive leukemia case. Yeah, but drinking water is more of a problem. I was told that this kindergarten tried to save money by using it dug a well in their backyard, so it didn't use the water provided by the town or by the city. They dug a well, and that's where the problem came from. But the reason why they do that is to save money because water is too expensive. Now you have to know that 87% of China's underground water is contaminated, and that's a conservative estimate. So it's very sad. Yeah. Water pollution is a serious problem. And this is not an isolated case. I think there are many schools or kindergartens or facilities like that across China. They just do not know yet. All right. Okay. All right. That seems to be all. Here's a question from Seek the Truth. How do you think the upcoming EU-China talks will turn out? It's not looking good with what's happening with China beaming laser at a German aircraft. And Wang Yi's latest comment in Europe about the Russian-Ukraine war isn't helping either. So I really don't know. I don't know what will happen next. Um, I think we'll have to figure out the political status of Xi Jinping before we could determine where the upcoming EU-China talks will go. Yeah. Howie Brown. Well, thank you, Howie. Okay. Netflix foreign. Why didn't they just use water bottles like everyone does for drinking? Well, you need food, you need water for cooking. Because in Chinese kindergartens, in Chinese schools or even workplaces, they all have a kitchen. They all cook food themselves for the staff and for the kids. So, so they use the water for cooking, for food, and probably for water. So, and it could be very expensive if you bring bottled water every day. So yeah. So I think there were a few. There were what, the 7% there were like a dozen, a handful of kids whose lead testing was kind of normal. I think those kids might have been bringing food and water from home. They may be the ones who do not eat or drink at school at all, and therefore they're safe. But there are very few of them. All right. That's all. Here's a question. Okay. All right. We're going to end it a little earlier. Going on for 3 months? No, I think this has been going on for years because the same incident, the same thing happened 19 years ago. The exact same thing happened 19 years ago. And I don't think the government did anything. So this has been going on for a while because this school is new. They got the permit to build the school only a few years ago because this land was used as a dump site for that heavy metal processing company. So yeah, so it has been happening ever since the school was built. All right, that's all for tonight. Okay, we'll end it a little early. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I'll see you next week. All right, bye. Bye.